I never thought I'd end up in a war with my own neighbors. But that's exactly what happened when I moved to the outskirts of Willow Creek, a small suburban enclave that butted right up against my family's old farm property. The farm had been in my family for generations, over 100 acres of rolling fields, a weathered barn, and a modest house where I'd grown up helping my grandparents tend to the crops and livestock. After they passed, I inherited it all, but times were tough and I couldn't keep it running as a full operation. Instead, I turned it into a quiet homestead, growing vegetables for the local market and raising a few chickens and goats for extra income. It was peaceful, or at least it was, until the HOA from the adjacent Willow Creek estates decided my land was their business. The trouble started innocently enough. Willow Creek Estates was one of those cookie-cutter developments that sprang up in the 90s with manicured lawns, identical beige houses, and a homeowners association that ruled with an iron fist. My farm wasn't part of their jurisdiction, thank God for that, but the boundary line ran right along my eastern fence, where their backyards met my fields. For years, there'd been no issues. The previous residents were friendly folks who waved when they saw me on my tractor. But then Karen moved in. Her real name was Karen Whitaker, but she embodied every stereotype you'd imagine. Sharp bob haircut, perpetually pursed lips, and a clipboard always at the ready. She was the HOA president, elected unopposed because no one else wanted the headache. From day one, she had it out for me. It began with a letter. I found it taped to my mailbox one crisp autumn morning, the kind where the dew still clung to the grass and the air smelled like fresh earth. The envelope was pristine white, stamped with the Willow Creek Estates logo, a stylized tree that looked nothing like the actual willows in the area. Inside, it detailed a formal complaint about my property. Apparently, my chickens were audible from adjacent lots, violating some noise ordinance that didn't even apply to me since I wasn't in the HOA. I chuckled at first, thinking it was a mix-up. I called the number listed, and Karen answered on the first ring, her voice clipped and authoritative. "Mr. Harlan," she said, as if she already knew everything about me, "your farm is an eyesore and a nuisance. We have standards here in Willow Creek, and your rustic setup is bringing down property values." I tried to explain politely that my land predated their development by decades and wasn't subject to their rules. She huffed and said she'd look into it, but I could tell she wasn't backing down. Over the next few weeks, the complaints escalated. She'd drive her shiny SUV along the shared road, stopping to take photos of my fence, which she claimed was dilapidated. It was a sturdy wooden post and rail setup, painted fresh every spring. But to her, it wasn't the white picket perfection of the suburbs. Then came the fines, or at least attempts at them. She started sending me bills for HOA assessments, insisting that since my driveway touched their private road for a few feet, I owed dues. I ignored them, of course, but it grated on me. This wasn't just petty. It felt personal. My name's Tom Harlan, by the way. I'm in my mid-40s, divorced, with 2 kids who visit on weekends. The farm was my sanctuary after the split, a place to rebuild, to teach my son and daughter about hard work and roots. But Karen's meddling started affecting that. One evening, as I was fixing dinner in the old kitchen, the phone rang. It was my ex-wife Sarah, sounding worried. "Tom, the kids said some lady from the neighborhood yelled at them while they were playing near the fence. She told them your animals were dangerous and they shouldn't be there." My blood boiled. The dangerous animals were a couple of goats that liked to nibble grass and bleat hello. I confronted Karen the next day at an HOA meeting I crashed, uninvited, but public enough that they couldn't kick me out right away. The meeting was in their community center, a bland building with fluorescent lights and folding chairs arranged in neat rows. Karen stood at the podium droning on about landscaping guidelines when I raised my hand. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my tone even, "but I'd like to address the harassment I've been receiving." The room went silent. Karen's eyes narrowed. "This is for members only, Mr. Harlan. Your property isn't under our purview." "Exactly," I shot back. "So why am I getting letters and visits?" She dismissed me with a wave, but I could see the flush creeping up her neck. After the meeting, she cornered me in the parking lot. "Listen here," she hissed. "Your farm is a blight. We're expanding, and eyesores like yours scare off buyers. Clean it up or we'll make you." Expanding? That was news to me. I did some digging later that night, poring over county records on my laptop while the crickets chirped outside. Turns out the HOA was petitioning to annex adjacent lands for community green space. My farm was in their sights. The emotional toll started to hit. Nights were sleepless, worrying about legal fees if this escalated. My kids noticed. My daughter Lily, who's 12, asked why I seem so angry all the time. "Is it that mean lady?" she said one weekend, helping me feed the chickens. I nodded, trying to laugh it off. "Yeah, but don't worry. We'll handle it." But inside, the frustration built. Karen wasn't just complaining. She was invading. I caught her once, trespassing on my land, measuring the distance from her fence to my barn with a tape measure. "What the hell?" I yelled, storming out. She scurried back like a rat, claiming she was inspecting for violations. That was the last straw. I installed a basic security camera on the barn, pointing at the boundary. Sure enough, the footage showed her sneaking over multiple times. Even at night, flashlight in hand, poking around my fields. I confided in my neighbor on the other side, old Mr. Jenkins, who'd farmed here longer than me. "HOAs are like weeds," he grumbled over coffee. "They spread if you don't uproot them." He told stories of similar battles, where folks lost land to eminent domain tricks or endless lawsuits. I wasn't going to let that happen. But revenge? That wasn't my style at first. I tried the legal route, consulting a local attorney named Mike, a no-nonsense guy who'd handled property disputes before. "You've got solid ground," he said, reviewing the deeds. "But these HOAs have deep pockets. Best to document everything." So I did. Every letter, every photo, every trespass logged in a binder. But as the weeks turned to months, Karen upped the ante. She reported me to animal control for neglect, claiming my goats looked thin. They weren't. They were just active. The inspector laughed it off, but it wasted my time. Then came the farm invasion that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning, the sun just peeking over the hills, casting golden light on the dew-kissed crops. I was in the barn mucking out stalls when I heard engines revving. Peeking out, I saw 3 trucks pulling up to my fence line from the HOA side. Karen was there, directing workers with chainsaws and bulldozers. "What in God's name?" I muttered, grabbing my phone. They were cutting through my fence, claiming it was encroaching on their property. Encroaching? The survey markers were clear. I ran out, yelling for them to stop. Karen smirked, holding up a piece of paper. "We have approval to remove hazards," she said. "Hazards? My fence?" The workers hesitated, but she barked orders, and they started sawing. Wood splintered, and my heart pounded. This wasn't just bullying. This was destruction. I called the sheriff, but by the time Deputy Ramirez arrived, they'd torn down a 50-foot section. "Ma'am, this is private property," he told Karen, but she argued back with fake documents. It took hours to sort, and in the end, they left, but the damage was done. My goats had wandered into their yards, and Karen filed more complaints. That night, staring at the gap in my fence, anger turned to resolve. I wasn't going to let her win. Mike, my lawyer, suggested countermeasures. "We can sue for trespass and damages," he said. But I wanted more, something that would expose her, make her regret ever crossing that line. That's when the idea of spike strips came to mind. Not the illegal kind, mind you, those are for cops chasing fugitives, but something similar, legal, to protect my property from vehicular invasions. I researched online, finding tire deflation devices used by farmers to deter off-roaders. They were spikes that popped up on pressure, designed for driveways, but planning revenge required caution. I didn't want to hurt anyone, just catch her in the act. The camera footage showed her patterns. She'd drive onto my land via a dirt path that skirted the fence, thinking it was hidden. If I placed the strips there, disguised in the grass, her next invasion would be her last. It was clever, legal, on my property for protection, and satisfying. But first I needed evidence. I upgraded my cameras to motion-activated ones with night vision, hidden in trees. Over the next few days, while repairing the fence, I stewed on the plan. The emotional weight was heavy. This farm held memories of my grandparents' laughter, harvest festivals, the smell of hay. Losing it to Karen's greed would break me. My son, Jack, 15, saw my stress. "Dad, we can fight this," he said, helping hammer posts. His words fueled me. As winter approached, the complaints didn't stop. Karen organized a petition to the county, calling my farm a public nuisance. At a town hall meeting, she stood up, voice dripping with false concern. "Think of the children. Those animals could carry diseases." The crowd murmured, but I spoke up, presenting facts about my clean inspections. A few nodded, but Karen's allies booed. It was humiliating. Back home, I ordered the spike strips, discreet retractable models from a farm supply site. They arrived in plain boxes, and I installed them under cover of darkness, burying them in the dirt path with warning signs posted to keep it legal. Private property tire damage possible. Subtle, but there. The tension built like a storm. I knew she'd try again. Her type couldn't resist. Sure enough, one foggy evening my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Footage showed her SUV creeping along the path. Lights off. She was invading again, probably to plant evidence or sabotage. My heart raced as I watched live. The tires hit the strips, pop, hiss, deflate. She swerved, stuck in the mud, caught red-handed. I called the sheriff, evidence in hand, but that was just the beginning. The fog hung thick that evening, wrapping my farm in a ghostly veil that muffled every sound except the faint hiss of Karen's tires deflating on the spike strips. I stood in my kitchen, gripping my phone, watching the live feed from the new cameras. Her SUV lurched to a stop, its front end sinking into the muddy path where she tried to sneak onto my land. Her silhouette scrambled out, flashlight beam darting wildly as she inspected the damage. Even through the grainy footage, I could see her fury. Her shoulders rigid, her head snapping side to side like she was looking for someone to blame. My pulse thrummed with a mix of triumph and nerves. This was it, the moment I'd caught her red-handed. But I had to play it smart. One wrong move and she'd spin this to make me the villain. I called Deputy Ramirez again, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. She's on my property, stuck on my tire strips. I've got it all on video. He sighed, probably tired of the back and forth between me and the HOA, but promised to be there in 20 minutes. I grabbed a jacket, my boots crunching on the gravel as I headed out to confront her, not to gloat, but to make sure she didn't try to cover her tracks. The air was damp, smelling of wet earth and pine, and the cold bit at my fingertips. As I approached, Karen was on her knees by the SUV, muttering curses, her pristine coat streaked with mud. She didn't see me at first, but when I cleared my throat, she whipped around, her face a mask of indignation. "Tom Harlan, you did this on purpose," she shrieked, jabbing her flashlight at me like a weapon. "You sabotaged my car." I kept my distance, hands in my pockets, and pointed to the warning signs I'd posted. "You're trespassing, Karen. Those strips are legal on my property to stop intruders." You ignored the signs. Her mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. She knew she was caught, but Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat. "This is harassment," she spat. "I'm here on official HOA business, inspecting boundary violations." I almost laughed. At 9 p.m., in the dark, with no permission? "Save it for the sheriff," I said, nodding toward the red and blue lights flickering in the distance. Ramirez arrived with another deputy, their boots squelching as they surveyed the scene. Karen launched into a tirade, claiming I'd set a dangerous trap and that she was only protecting the community. But the cameras didn't lie. I showed Ramirez the footage on my phone, her SUV creeping onto my land, lights off, clear as day. The warning signs were visible too, glowing faintly under her headlights. "Ma'am, you're on private property without consent," Ramirez said, his tone firm but weary. "And you've been warned before." Karen's face flushed crimson, but she doubled down, waving her clipboard. "I have rights. This farm is a blight, and I'm documenting it." Ramirez wasn't buying it. He issued her a trespassing citation and called a tow truck for her SUV, which was now a sad, lopsided heap in the mud. Back at the house, I poured a coffee, hands still shaking from the confrontation. The victory felt good, but it was only half the battle. Karen wasn't going to stop. She'd escalate, twist the story, maybe even sue me for the car damage. I called Mike, my lawyer, and sent him the footage. "This is gold," he said, his voice crackling with excitement over the phone. "Trespassing, caught on tape with clear signage? We can counter any move she makes. But let's go bigger. She's overstepped, and we can expose the HOA's whole game." His words lit a fire in me. This wasn't just about protecting my farm anymore. It was about turning the tables, showing everyone in Willow Creek what Karen and her cronies were really up to. The next morning, I woke to find an email from the HOA signed by Karen, demanding $5,000 for damages to her vehicle and threatening legal action if I didn't comply. I forwarded it to Mike, who laughed. "She's got no case. Let's file a countersuit for trespassing, property damage from the fence incident, and emotional distress." Emotional distress? I hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. The constant harassment had worn me down. Sleepless nights, the kids worrying, the strain of defending my home. We drafted the paperwork, including a demand for the HOA to cease their annexation attempts. But I wanted more than a lawsuit. I wanted the neighborhood to see Karen for who she was. I started talking to other residents. Most of Willow Creek estates were decent folks, families and retirees who just wanted to live quietly. But Karen's reign had them scared. Fines for minor infractions like leaving a trash can out an extra day or planting unapproved flowers. I invited a few neighbors over for coffee, setting up chairs in my barn to keep it casual. There was Lisa, a single mom who'd been fined for her kid's basketball hoop. Greg, a retiree hit with fees for a non-compliant mailbox. And Priya, whose garden gnomes were deemed tasteless. They were hesitant at first, nervous about crossing Karen. But when I showed them the footage of her trespassing, their eyes widened. "She's been sneaking onto my land for months," I said. "And she's trying to annex it for the HOA. Who's next?" The barn smelled of hay and old wood, and the morning light filtered through the slats, casting stripes across their faces. Lisa spoke up first, her voice trembling. She threatened to foreclose on my house over a $200 fine I couldn't pay on time. "Is that even legal?" Greg chimed in, recounting how Karen had bullied him into removing his beloved rose bushes because they clashed with the neighborhood aesthetic. Priya nodded, her hands twisting in her lap. "She told me my gnomes lowered property values. I threw them out to avoid trouble." It was clear Karen wasn't just my problem. She was a tyrant, and the HOA was her weapon. We formed a plan. Step 1 was to gather more evidence, not just against Karen, but the HOA's shady practices. Greg had a friend in the county clerk's office who could pull records on their annexation petition. Priya offered to talk to other residents, quietly building a coalition. Lisa, who worked in PR, suggested a public expose, a town hall where we'd present everything. But I still wanted that personal sting for Karen, something to make her squirm. The spike strips were a start, but they were defensive. I needed something proactive, something that hit her where it hurt, her pride. Mike suggested digging into the HOA's finances. "If they're pushing for annexation, there's money involved," he said. "Follow the trail." I spent nights on my laptop, combing through public records with Greg's friend's help. What we found was a gold mine. The HOA had been funneling dues into a shady consulting firm owned by Karen's cousin, supposedly for landscaping studies. It smelled like embezzlement. We also discovered the annexation petition was riddled with forged signatures, residents who'd never agreed to it. Armed with this, we planned the town hall, booking the community center for the next month. But Karen wasn't idle. She must have sensed trouble, because the harassment ramped up. Animal control showed up again, this time claiming my chickens were unpermitted livestock. Another false report. Dismissed, but it ate up my time and energy. One evening, as I was fixing dinner for the kids, Jack burst in, face red. "Dad, that lady was at it again. She was yelling at Lily by the fence, saying we're going to lose the farm." Lily trailed in, eyes wet, clutching her stuffed rabbit. My heart broke. "Nobody's taking this place," I said, hugging them both. But the anger was back, sharper now. Karen had crossed a line, scaring my kids. I doubled down on the plan, coordinating with Lisa, Greg, and Priya. We printed flyers for the town hall, keeping them vague but intriguing. Willow Creek HOA, time for truth. We slipped them into mailboxes under cover of night, avoiding Karen's spies, her loyalists who patrolled the streets like hawks. The day of the town hall loomed and tension coiled in my gut. Karen tried to cancel our booking, claiming it was unsanctioned, but the community center was county property, not HOA controlled. Mike filed an injunction to ensure it went ahead. Meanwhile, I kept the spike strips active, adding more cameras in case Karen tried another stunt. Sure enough, 2 nights before the meeting, my phone buzzed again. Footage showed a pickup truck, not Karen's, creeping along the path. It hit the strips, tires popping, and 2 men jumped out, cursing. They weren't HOA. They looked like hired muscle, maybe from her cousin's firm. I didn't call the sheriff this time. I just saved the footage. It was another piece of the puzzle. The morning of the town hall, I stood in my fields, the sun rising over the hills, casting long shadows across the crops. The farm felt like a fortress under siege, but I wasn't alone anymore. Neighbors were rallying, and Karen's empire was cracking. I thought of my grandparents, their calloused hands teaching me to plant seeds, their laughter echoing in the barn. This land was more than dirt, it was legacy. As I headed to the community center, binder of evidence in hand, I felt a surge of resolve. Karen thought she could bully me into submission, but she'd underestimated me. Tonight we'd expose her, and I'd make sure she never set foot on my farm again. The community center was packed that evening, the air thick with anticipation and the faint smell of stale coffee from the urn in the corner. Folding chairs were filled with Willow Creek residents, some whispering nervously, others clutching our flyers with curious expressions. I stood at the back, my binder of evidence heavy in my hands, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about my farm anymore. It was about exposing Karen Whitaker and the HOA's corruption, about giving my neighbors the courage to fight back. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the podium where Lisa, Greg, Priya, and I would soon take our stand. My kids were at home with Sarah, safe from the drama, but I could still see Lily's teary face and Jack's clenched fists in my mind. This was for them, for our home, for every memory tied to that land. Karen arrived late, striding in with her usual clipboard and a forced smile, her heels clicking on the linoleum. She'd clearly caught wind of the meeting and came to control the narrative. "This is an unauthorized gathering," she announced, voice sharp as she planted herself at the front. The HOA board was not consulted. A few of her loyalists nodded, but the crowd's murmurs grew hostile. Lisa stepped up first, her PR skills kicking in. "This is a public venue, Karen," she said calmly, holding up the county permit. "We're here to discuss community concerns. Sit down or contribute." The room erupted in applause and Karen's smile faltered. She sat, but her eyes burned into me like lasers. Greg took the podium, his gruff voice steady as he presented the annexation petition. "This document," he said, projecting scanned pages onto a screen, "claims to have your signatures, but half of you never signed it." Gasps rippled through the crowd as he highlighted forged names, people who were out of town, even one who'd passed away. Priya followed, sharing stories of petty fines and intimidation, her voice shaking but resolute. "Karen threatened my family's peace over garden gnomes," she said. "What's next? Our homes?" The crowd was hooked, leaning forward, some nodding, others whispering angrily. I could feel the tide turning, but I knew Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath, the binder's weight grounding me. "I'm Tom Harlan," I began, "and my farm's been my family's for generations. But Karen Whitaker's been trespassing on my land, destroying my property, and harassing my kids." I played the footage from my cameras, Karen sneaking onto my fields, flashlight in hand, her SUV hitting the spike strips, the hired men in the pickup truck. The crowd gasped, then cheered as Karen's face drained of color. "She's not just bullying me," I continued. "She's using HOA funds to pay her cousin's consulting firm for fake studies." I showed the financial records, the numbers stark on the screen. "This isn't about community standards. It's about greed." Karen leapt up, shouting, "This is slander. You'll hear from my lawyer." But the crowd wasn't having it. "Sit down," someone yelled. Others joined in, chanting, "Explain the money! Explain the forgeries!" Ramirez, who'd been standing quietly at the back, stepped forward to keep order. I pressed on, detailing the fence destruction, the false animal control reports, the threats to my kids. "I put up spike strips to protect my property," I said, "and Karen drove right over them, ignoring my signs. She's not above the law." The applause was deafening, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Mike, my lawyer, closed the presentation with a bombshell. "We've filed a lawsuit against Ms. Whitaker and the HOA for trespassing, property damage, and fraud. We're also petitioning the county to dissolve the HOA's charter due to these abuses." The crowd roared, some standing to clap. Karen tried to speak, but her voice was drowned out. She stormed out, her clipboard forgotten on her chair, as residents mobbed us with questions and support. "We're with you, Tom," Lisa's neighbor shouted. "No more fines," another added. It felt like a weight lifted, but I knew the war wasn't over. Karen would fight dirty, and I had to be ready. The next week was a whirlwind. The local paper ran a story on the town hall, headlined "HOA Scandal Rocks Willow Creek." Social media buzzed, with residents posting their own Karen stories. Someone even started a hashtag, "You're Down with Karen," which trended locally. My cameras caught no more trespassers, but Karen's SUV stayed gone. probably still in the shop after the spike strips. Mike pushed the lawsuit forward, and the county launched an investigation into the HOA's finances. They froze the annexation petition, citing irregularities. Neighbors started ignoring Karen's fines, and her allies began distancing themselves. At a follow-up HOA meeting, only a dozen people showed up, and Karen's motions to sanction me were voted down. But the sweetest victory came quietly. One morning, as I was tending the chickens with Jack and Lily, a delivery truck pulled up. It dropped off a package from the county, an official letter confirming my farm's historic status, granting it protected zoning. Karen's annexation dreams were dead. I read it aloud to the kids, my voice catching. This means the farm stays ours, forever. Lily hugged me, her stuffed rabbit squished between us. No more mean lady? She asked. Not if I can help it, I said, ruffling her hair. Jack grinned, hammering a new fence post with extra force. We crushed her, Dad. Karen resigned as HOA president a week later, citing personal reasons. Rumor had it she was moving, her house listed for sale at a loss. The HOA elected Lisa as interim president, and she immediately slashed the petty rules, focusing on actual community needs like park repairs. My lawsuit was still pending, but Mike was confident we'd win damages. The farm felt alive again, goats bleating, crops growing, the barn's familiar creak soothing my nerves. I'd walk the fields at dusk, the sky streaked with pink and gold, and feel my grandparents' presence. They'd fought for this land, and so had I. It wasn't just a win over Karen. It was a triumph for every underdog who'd ever faced a bully. As I sat on the porch one evening, sipping coffee and watching the stars, I thought about how close I'd come to losing it all. The spike strips, the cameras, the town hall, they weren't just tactics. They were proof that standing up pays off. I'd turned the tables, not with violence or vengeance, but with evidence and community. Willow Creek was changing, and I'd helped spark it. If you've got an HOA horror story or faced a Karen of your own, drop it in the comments below. Let's keep this fight going.